I will read you a little story in which there's a little girl called Lulu. You can decide how old she is. And she is essentially throwing a tantrum. There once was a girl named Lulu, and she was a pain. She wasn't a pain in the elbow. She wasn't a pain in the knee. She was a pain, a very big pain in the butt. Now, Lulu was an only child, and her mom and dad gave her everything she wanted. And guess what? Lulu wanted everything. Tons of candy, tons of toys, tons of watching tons of cartoons on TV. And if her mom and her dad ever said, and they hardly ever said it, "Sorry, darling, we think you've had enough," Lulu would screech till the light bulbs burst and throw herself down on the floor, and then she would kick her heels and wave her arms. And pretty soon, her mom and dad would say, "Well, just this once," and they would let her have it, whatever it was that she wanted. Okay, so this is actually the definition of, or the description of spoiled child, where the parents have actually contributed to the existence of the tantrum, because screeching in that scenario, this child is learning that actually screeching and yelling works. So, but 2 weeks before Lulu's birthday, she announced to her mom and dad that she wanted a brontosaurus for her birthday present. Yes, she wanted a brontosaurus for a pet. At first, Lulu's mom and dad thought she was making a little joke. And then they saw that she was serious. They patiently explained that a brontosaurus is a quite enormous dinosaur who does not live in people's houses. Now, this is the other part about a tantrum, which is that adults are trying to be very reasonable and explain things. But because in a child, fantasy and reality are not separated out, it really doesn't matter what our explanations consist of, because this is about something usually that is going on in the child's mind. Lulu's mom and her dad continued explaining to her that although a brontosaurus is into eating plants, and although it is cute, it is much too huge and too wild to be a good pet. Maybe she could have a dog, a cat, a goldfish, a bird, a guinea pig. Yes, a brontosaurus? Definitely no. No? Her mom and dad were telling Lulu no? Lulu wasn't used to hearing no. And she really hated hearing no. Now, I hear quite a lot of parents saying this, that their child really has trouble with being told no, which means that their will is being frustrated. And in other words, the parent is putting a boundary. Now, the fact is that every child needs a boundary, and no child likes having a boundary. They need a boundary doesn't mean then you need their approval in order to be placing boundaries. So, this story is helpful because it's so wildly off possibility, because a brontosaurus can't be brought home, that comes a point where a parent is going to say no. To show how much she hated hearing no, she screeched and screeched and screeched till all the light bulbs in the living room burst. And in between screeches, she shouted, "I want a brontosaurus for my birthday present." "Well, maybe we could get you a nice pet rabbit," said her mom. So this is the other thing about tantrums, is that parents are trying to negotiate in the middle of a tantrum. It doesn't work, because it isn't about that. Or even a nice pet rat. "No, no, 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 no," screeched Lulu. Then she threw herself on the floor and kicked her heels and waved her arms and screeched some more. 4 days, 8 days, 10 days, 12 days passed. So that's the other thing, is that a tantrum feels endless to those of us who are at the receiving end of it. Lulu kept screeching and throwing herself on the floor and kicking her heels and waving her arms. Lulu's mom and her dad kept saying no. Until finally, the day before Lulu's birthday, right after lunch, Lulu said to her mom and dad, "Okay then, if you aren't going to get me a brontosaurus, I'm going out and getting one for myself." She packed a small suitcase, said goodbye to her mom and dad, and walked out the door. And they let her go. Partly because they thought she'd change her mind and come back home in about 2 minutes, and partly because it was nice to not have her screeching and kicking and waving and being a pain. "Let's have a cup of tea and a couple of cookies," Lulu's mom said to her dad. "Excellent idea," her dad replied. So they went into the kitchen and started munching on some cookies, and pretty soon they'd forgotten all about Lulu. Which really which really lets us know what a relief it is when the tantrum is over. And it could be over because you gave in, or it could be over because you were consistent with your boundary. The results of those two things are going to be completely different. I will say that as a psychotherapist, we find that if you and your child have got into a will battle in your early stages, between the ages of 2 and 5, then the will battles that are going to come from 14 upwards are going to be easier to handle. But if you have avoided will battles as a toddler, then neither of you are prepared for what happens when there is a bigger will battle during teenage years. So it's far easier to start getting some practice about boundary setting and about what happens in my family when I throw a tantrum, when they are still 2 years old and 3 years old and 4 years old. So a tantrum isn't a big problem. It's just about, it's a behavior, it's communicating something, it's usually demanding a boundary from the adult so that the child can start to learn to tolerate frustration.